Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bring a Hacker to Work Days. We will get started at about 2:05 so that we can give folks a chance to get in here, but we will be starting promptly at 2:05. Um, uh, do you prefer Elizabeth or Miss Wharton, or how should I refer to you?
Liz is perfect.
Liz?
I was gonna say if it's my nieces or nephew, then it's Aunt Lizzie, or if it's my siblings asking for money, then it's definitely Lizzie. So
Liz works. Okay. All right. I can hear you fine, so we will get started in about 4 minutes.
awesome. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. All right, let's get started. So this is the Black Girls Hack Bring a Hacker to Work Day. So this is our day in the life series where we have real life information security professionals come and tell you what their job is like so that you can have an idea of what your future careers would look like. So I'm very excited that we have Elizabeth Wharton, Liz Wharton, and she's Lawyer Liz on um, all the social media. She's the chief of staff at Skype, and she's bringing over a decade of legal public policy and business experience to her, to us. So we're going to hear about what she's done so far, see if we can try to figure out her world domination plan and what it's going to look like for those of us who want to achieve legal goals in cybersecurity moving forward. So, Liz, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I can't explain how excited I am that first of all, y'all would include me in your Sunday plans, but also that I get to chat with, I love working with folks early in their career or perhaps at a pivot point. And that's one of the things. So hopefully, and yes, reminder, please put any questions you may have in the chat. The goal that I wanted, or message that I wanted to share, was one, that it's a crazy journey and it is okay to pivot. It is okay to pivot as many times as you want. And also, it kind of become so good at what you do that you can't be ignored. And then also, kind of in the back of my mind, I'm selfish. So I want to also begin fostering a relationship that you understand that lawyers are not the legal team. uh, we are to blame for everything. And we are probably the root cause for a lot of different things. But at the same time, we all have the same goal when working for a company and developing a product, or um, all of that stuff. So it's really build those relationships and start having those conversations early on, because a lot of the issues that I see in some of the, both the technology, cybersecurity, you think, wow, if only people had started talking about this stuff beforehand. Or if you had a question, go to the lawyers and say, hey, this doesn't rub me the right way. This is a contract provision. Or for example, if you're doing bug bounties or doing research on your own, and a big company sends you oh, well, sure, we'll give you a payout for your bug bounty, but you get a contract. You have that relationship with an attorney, that a friend. I don't know how many times, in the background, I'm looking at stuff going, yeah, that one's problematic. Go find someone wiser than I am. But anyway, so with that said, those are my two goals for the conversation. I see the drone talk. Yeah, if you are looking, I mean, y'all have found that one of the most fun careers, in the sense of, I don't know many lawyers, for example, that have been able to go fly drones on one of the runways at the world's busiest airport for research, of course. I mean, yeah, that is, I have to admit, I'm kind of spoiled. But if you had told me 20 years ago, when I first graduated law school, that I was going to, right now with Scythe, I'm chief of staff. We are an adversary emulation platform. And do I know how our platform is built? Do you think? No, absolutely not. That's not my job. So I help execute the vision and think of everything from HR to legal department. So I'm reviewing our contracts, our partnerships. I'm serving as chief operating officer, down to strategic planning and meeting with different, our marketing, and in some cases our engineering and our CTO, and saying, okay, what is your goal? How can we remove roadblocks? How can I help you execute your vision? And so just because you hear lawyer doesn't always mean you actually have to be sitting and, I don't know, practicing law every day. There's so many facets to that. But what really started as I'd say a hobby, but I admittedly grew up a nerd. I did marching band. I played with computers in my parents' basement. I would swipe my brother's Nintendo. Uh, and please, none of y'all, if anyone puts in the chat, I will be so angry that you have no idea what a Game Boy is, because we're not going to discuss that. But back when you would have to put batteries in them, and they would die within a couple, yeah. Um, but building on that, I had friends that, as I was becoming a business attorney and working in banking and finance, they would come and ask questions. And we'd be sitting at a bar, we'd be doing something and say, hey, what if I did this? Or what if I wanted to do this? Is this legal? And I had no idea, and would have to explain to them, I'm a lawyer, but not that kind. And I got tired of answering that. Oh my gosh, and talk about that. So admittedly, I do still play Pokemon Go all the time. And if anyone wants to become friends, just hit me up on Twitter, like drop me a DM. But really start going, I don't like not knowing the answer. So for example, how I got started working with drones was friends who were doing RF radio frequency research with software defined radios, wanted to do some testing for a pen test and said, hey, what if I put some of my software, some of my stuff on a drone and flew it over an office building? Is that legal? I was like, I mean, you raise a good point. A drone really is just a quadcopter, really is just a flying computer. I don't know. But I've had a couple of beers. This is not the time to ask. Give me the weekend. Let me find out for you. And pulling those threads. So, one of the first points is ask the questions, be curious, and follow your curiosity, even if it is not specifically your current job, your current role, because you have no idea where a rabbit hole may lead. And come a couple 6 months later, I'm persistent. And when I had questions, I tried to find every meetup, every unmanned systems, every drone group, from hobbyists to at the state level. I worked on state policy. And so I just would show up to everything. And eventually people started noticing. They're like, hey, didn't I see you at this other meeting? Didn't I see you at this aviation? Didn't I see you doing this? Because basically I became so good at what I was doing and really pulled those threads and learned so much about unmanned systems and the legal framework around it that I couldn't be ignored. So, one of the things that really struck me as I was asked to sit in on an aviation panel. So, the state of Georgia was looking at their plans for aviation, so airports, all kinds of stuff for the next 5 to 10 years. And as a favor to one of my contacts, I said, hey, would you mind representing our organization and go attend the meeting? I said, sure, no problem. I go to the meeting, and other than the administrative assistant who was getting coffee for everyone, I was the only woman in the room at the table. And that's kind of a moment where you just sit here and go, surely I'm not the smartest. Surely I'm not the only one. And yeah, I mean, it really was. And I sat there and thought, okay, this is an aha moment. And we're not even talking about the fact that basically I was sitting at a table full of white old men. And I thought, okay, this needs to change. We need to do something about this. And it really reinvigorated me to say, okay, why is my voice not getting heard? I obviously have built this wealth of knowledge. And so I said, all right, if it takes an accidental invitation to be able to get my seat at the table, I was like, what can I do? So I realized nobody was publishing to get the invitations to join groups like this and come talk to you. That was like, because they don't know that I'm out there. They don't know that I have this wealth of knowledge. So I started going to all my friends who either had blogs, had podcasts, and essentially raised the noise floor of just, I self-published articles on LinkedIn, and I saw the organizations that I was attending the meetings. I volunteered to become an officer, or I said, hey, do y'all need an article for this? I'd be happy to write one. In fact, I've probably got something I can pull together. Basically, again, I became so loud, they couldn't overlook me. And it's once you start doing that. So if there is some coding aspect or some, like, you have realized a different way to approach a problem, or, talk about it, write about it. And if you need help submitting to a CFP to get a conference, start small, find local conferences. But there are people such as myself, that others, that I would be more than happy to help review a CFP. Like, there are lots of folks who are willing to and have been in that position, but I just started doing it. And again, became so loud and so good. Like, basically, I brought my own chair. I said, all right, you're not letting me sit at this table. You're not inviting me. How about I'm going to create my own magic? I'm bringing my own chair. I'm publishing my own articles, to the point where they couldn't ignore it. And it was a fun and funny evolution when you realize you're going to some of these conferences. And through part of that, I saw a recruiter had reached out to me and said, hey, I know you're at a law firm. I know you enjoy what you're doing, but City of Atlanta is looking for an attorney to come in and help work on technology issues at the airport. I thought, oh, hello. Somebody finally heard me. Somebody realized. And I mean, I was showing up like as a lobbyist. You can imagine the much the chagrin of my law firm, where I'm showing up at the drone hearings, the aviation stuff, and they're like, but we don't have a client that's paying you to do that. I said, not yet. Not yet, you don't, but you will. And again, I built an area of expertise with, and yes, there were people who were willing to give me a chance, who said, all right, we have an online newsletter. You send me something good. I'll put it out there. Next thing they knew, because I also am not afraid to hustle. And if they publish an article of mine, don't think I wasn't sending it to my grandmother, asking her to send it to all of her friends, that I wasn't my siblings who had no idea what technology. So they're like, wait, what? I said, I need you to click on this article. I need you to read it. I need you to send it to your friends. They're like, but we don't care. I said, I don't care. I need the clicks. My article needs to go. And you never know who you're going to send it to, who's going to send it to someone, who's going to send it to someone else. So one of those is, you may feel as your career is going that you are shouting into a hurricane, that no one hears you, no one's seeing what you're doing. Hustle, hustle, hustle. Keep doing it. Keep chipping away. Build those connections. And again, reach out. You don't know where it's going to fall. So when a recruiter, having seen something I did, reached out and said, do you want to leave the law firm, come over to the airport? I was like, wait a minute. You're asking me if I want to play with gadgets and at the world's busiest airport. Well, not anymore. Atlanta's airport got knocked out of the number one spots by an airport in China, but it's still the busiest airport in the U.S., much to Chicago's chagrin. So, apologies in advance to anyone from Chicago. Sorry. How does it feel to be number two? But it really just opened up. But even at the airport, it was fascinating, because I kept being told, well, lawyers aren't technical. And I'm thinking, what do you mean? I was like, how can I be a good lawyer for you? How can I help you negotiate your contract, structure your projects, if I don't have some basic understanding of what you're doing? I mean, if we're going to rip out a NAS, like if we're going to sit there and reconfigure all these different things, I should know a little bit about, I don't know how the RF stuff works. If I'm going to help, with the drones, we would have people come in and say, I want to fly a drone at the airport. We're like, okay, great. I was like, so what kind of communication system are you using? They're like, well, I don't know. I'm like, well, is it, Wi-Fi? Are you using Bluetooth? Using cellular? How are you using? And they're like, well, I don't know. I said, well, because little known fact, we don't have antennas for cellular networks out on the runways. So because of a design, and this was something that was completely, being reconfigured, I was like, so if you're counting on a consistent cellular signal to control your aircraft, uh, it's not going to happen because we don't have that. That's just if you're looking for, Wi-Fi, you're connecting at the same frequencies that every other IoT device is that's, commercial off the shelf. So having that background knowledge made it a little bit better. But even then at the airport, people were just like, wait, what? So I just started showing up to more meetings, and I did my homework, and I was like, oh, okay. When we're like, again, kind of ripping off the DAS, like, all right, raising my hand going, hey, that's not how this works. But we can get you there. Here's how we're going to get you there. So again, you, I brought my own chair. I truly would show up at meetings that, and once people started recognizing like, oh, she actually knows what she's doing, then it snowballed. Same kind of thing with the writing, same kind of thing. And from there, I had several different startups that friends were working with. And because again, I showed up to every meeting I could, I got to know the people doing the work to then understand it myself, because I didn't have to know how to do it. And that's why even at Scythe, I don't have to know how we are engineering version, 3.4 of the product. But I do need to know that if our engineering team is stuck on a question, I say, oh, well, do y'all want to talk to this other contact I have? They're an expert in X or Y. Maybe you can brainstorm some ideas with them. And again, I'm just helping unstick a problem. But I do that because I've gotten out there, I've hustled. And, on Twitter, when people reach out with questions, a lot of the times I'm like, I have no idea. But let me look into this. Let me connect you with someone who's smarter than I am, who's, wiser on this topic. So that was kind of how from the airport, it translated to, I like to be part of the solution. And I like to watch what I've done become something rather than, one of the things I did not like and why I never went into litigation was I was like, you get done with a trial, and maybe depending on the type of litigation, you can look and say, oh, I helped that individual stay out of jail, or I helped this. But a lot of it is, oh, well, we reached a resolution, but how do you codify, as opposed to, I can look and say, hey, that's a company I built, or that's a hotel I helped finance. That's something tangible. So when startups started asking, hey, we'd like to take your approach to things and have you come in and help us build our company, it's like, sure, why not? So Scythe is my second startup, and hopefully not my last, but it really has been an evolution. And so that's why I say as well, pivot, pivot, pivot. Because if I had stayed in my lane, head down, doing business, lending, finance, working on real estate projects, I would be bored, and I would not have been able to do all the things that I've been able to do, which, it's not often I've flown and traveled to different countries to present at conferences. I've been able to impact legislation, both in the US as well as in some of the European approaches with the EU, and I continue to. And it's a constant journey that hopefully I've still got a long way to go. And also a quick reminder, it is perfectly okay to fail. I have more scars on my knees from times I have tripped over my own self, over times I have tripped over others, or I've been distracted. And it's the getting up, brushing yourself off, and going, okay, what can I learn from that? What can I take away? And just like do it again. Like okay, maybe I don't need to do that, but what if I do this? And so again, that pivoting, that understanding, it is okay that there are days that are going to suck eggs. And even as a startup, if you had asked us, and everyone always talks about the pandemic and, um, I was like, yeah. And initially for Scythe, all of our sales came from in-person conferences, and seeing our CEO or our CTO, different people speak at conferences. Well, when you take away conferences, you just took away our sales funnel. And yet we pivoted. We took a couple weeks, like looked back inside, and we found some other channels to do stuff. And we had our best year uh, for sales ever. And so I don't know, take a little bit of hope, and also depending on where y'all are, if you decide, or if you have no idea what you want to do when you grow up, that is still absolutely okay. Because I'd like to say I still have no idea, even though some would claim I'm a grown up. So I don't know. But anyway.
So let me ask you a quick question on that.
Mhm,
One of the questions that I had for you is, you've achieved a lot. I see that you're at a startup now, but
mhm.
what is your world domination plan? Like, how do you know that when you've achieved success, what are you shooting for? Are you looking for retirement, or like, what does that look like for you?
I don't know how well I would do with retirement if it actually just means that I would get to be able to do more picking and choosing of my projects. I don't sit still very well. And it's usually I'm multitasking on doing different things, for better or worse. But it's really just what what can I continue to help build? And be it through an active role through companies or volunteering. I love to see what some of the other, for example, Ron and Cindy Gula had, they had Tenable, among other things, and they amassed this both financial as well as knowledge and connections, and have basically said, I mean, they don't have to work, but they started the Gula Foundation and they found ways to really contribute to the community. I think that's probably my plan, is to reach that point where I'm helping because I want to and because I can. And I don't have to worry as much about, well, will I be able to pay the mortgage and, do that stuff. So,
So what does free time look like for you? What do you do outside of, like, are you constantly in a book and researching and, nerding out, or like, what do you do when you're not taking over the world?
well, I'd like to say, like, oh gosh, I mean, outside interests, really spending time with friends and family. And I took up cross stitching when I had, couldn't go out and do stuff. So admittedly, I have some very salty worded cross stitching that was not my grandmother's. For example, one that says, like, this is proof that I have the patience to stab something over 1,000 times. And, doing that and really finding time. Biggest challenge for me. So do as I suggest, not as I do, but put down the devices. I've tried to get really better about, if a colleague sends me a question at 11 o'clock at night, that I will pause, I'll look and I'll go, okay, no, no, the company will not cease to be. Uh, and if I don't answer this until after 8 o'clock in the morning, setting those boundaries and going. But for example, yesterday I went to a barbecue and festival with fully vaccinated, of course, but live music, stuff like that. Like, find what takes your mind and helps you reset and do it. And, uh, you know, life goals, I'd really love to get my pilot's license, but it has been pointed out to me that I'm a terrible driver. So maybe I shouldn't be. And I responded, there's far fewer like planes in the air, that you really don't have to worry about different. Yeah. It's just much more catastrophic if you get it wrong. So, um, but yes, that, and admittedly, I do watch a lot of trashy TV. I love reality shows,
Same.
and right, it's, you can just take your mind off of it, of whatever is going on, and there are times where I'm going, "Oh, you're a train wreck." I feel so much better about my, like, mistakes, because I've never done that, and I've never done that on national TV. So anyway, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm a big sucker for bad TV. Like that's one of the biggest things I do in my spare time. So you were talking about that you worked for the city of Atlanta doing
Mhm,
incident response. So
mhm,
I saw in your background that you were part of the 2018, excuse me,
mhm.
ransomware incident. So I guess what advice would you have for people? Do you think that the recent situation with the that we've seen in the news, if that do you think that was handled appropriately? What is your advice for those types of things?
Well, the first advice, and I will give this and I will shout this from the rafters: have a plan, have your plan printed out, have it somewhere where it is not like, go old school, kill that tree. And because uh, me being me, I happen to, so for those of you who don't know, March 22nd, 2018, first kind of notices that people started getting were probably around 7 a.m. Eastern. City of Atlanta was hit by SamSam ransomware. And as you can imagine, at the time, a big municipal attack really wasn't the thing. We'd seen some instances of it, but it absolutely crippled our systems, and not because specific. It's a series of unfortunate events, and understanding that it's going to happen. It's, you can't, the goal for information security, cybersecurity, is never zero attacks, zero instances. There is always some O day out there. And Manny's pointing out in the chat, like that Georgia Tech guy hit, there were actually several different uh, smaller local governments. Baltimore had been hit. Um, right around that same time, there was a school district in Colorado that got hit. I will say, in the conversations I was privy to, uh, there was never any discussion of paying the ransom. That just didn't, we had insurance, but that was a decision that the mayor made almost immediately. That whatever it was, we were, because paying the ransom, regardless, you're still going to have to rebuild your systems, because you don't know where, kind of think of it as an infection. You don't know where the infection has gotten to. You can't be sure. So you're always going to rebuild that. But one of the things that allowed us to get back to some semblance of order relatively quick is the fact that I had saved a lot of the contracts that we used. So for those of you who don't know, state, city, federal governments have certain contracting requirements, like language that we have to have. So I had saved a lot of the applicable city codes and samples of my go-to contracts and stuff on a backup thumb drive that I kept in my desk, and it just made it easier for me to do certain things. So having that backup when you've lost access to your entire document database. But by the grace of God, my laptop was on the Department of Aviation system, not the city system. And so I was able to fire up my laptop. I wasn't connected to any of the city's networks at the time. And having that backup on that I had kept separate, and also having printed copies of stuff, I was able to put that together. So when they said, Liz, what do you think we should do? I was like, oh, well, I can whip up an NDA that can get us talking to this incident response. Or, hey, I've got a copy of our contract with the following vendors that are on our list for incident response coverage. give me 2 minutes to run up to my office. And so having that backup is kind of the first thing. If you're ever, it sounds silly, but like the phone trees, because everyone's like, oh, I'll just, pull up your contacts from my cell phone. Well, okay, but we've just taken down the network and the Wi-Fi, and all of a sudden we're in different, like, okay, what if you don't have access to your contacts? Do you have a resilience plan? But yeah, that, and hydrate, and have a snack plan. Because when you are working 12, 14-hour days, and the kind of the central war rooms got very uh, dirty and smelly very quick. So knock over my microphone. But yeah, have a plan and just be prepared to, expect the unexpected.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, because I saw that, the first thing they did was pay the ransom. And, one of my, I guess, internal thoughts was, they really got off, cheap. But at the same time, like you said, that doesn't help you, because, they can decide, hey, I've got this money now. Like, why can't I just do another ransomware? Because, you haven't fixed the problem. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, no, there was I believe it was a Colorado school district that found that out the hard way. They, back in 2018, 2017, they paid and then got hit by the same group again. The other thing, kind of keeping in mind how when City of Atlanta's, the ransomware demand was around 52,000, the equivalent in Bitcoin, as opposed to Colonial that just paid, what do they pay? I know
it was like
CNA.
five. It was either, I've heard 4.4 and I've heard 5 million,
Yes.
but somewhere in there.
And CNA Insurance, one of the largest insurers in the world, just paid 40 million in ransom. It was announced probably Thursday, Friday that came out. And so you look at stuff like that, like, wow, okay. What do you do? And it doesn't help. But then again, I've also softened my stance a little bit. I would have solidly been in the no, 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 never, ever, ever, ever. Did I say never, ever? Never, ever pay the ransom. But there are some, like, I saw a couple of very, very small county governments that paid the ransom, were able to get their systems back up. And regardless of whether, they could trust that data and trust that information, they were still going to have to do all this. At the same time, it allowed them to continue providing services. And in an economically depressed area, when you have people counting on county services for everything from, transportation assistance and everything like that, I could understand, well, okay, maybe if it means that you can start providing back for your citizens that much quicker, and this is their only means of, for example, if they are counting on county services to provide funds, to make their rent, buy their groceries, or do stuff, I'm like, okay, I softened, but I don't like it. And it doesn't really help. But at the same time, there may be instances where it's like, okay, maybe, kind of.
Yeah, like I feel like when I first started like studying cybersecurity, like, probably in school, like maybe 10 years ago, they were talking about like our critical infrastructure and how there needed to be, incident response plans, and you needed to, kind of like not allow these to be like a, if you hit it in the right spot, then it's going to absolutely like fail. And that was probably like 10 years ago. So like when I
Mhm.
saw this, my first thought is like, where were the mitigations? Where were, what was the instant response? Where are the backups? What was your plan for if
Mhm.
this happened? Because like, it seemed like, things got really bad really quickly. I live in Virginia, and
Mhm.
it just happened to be that I left out the house that day, and I tried to go get gas, and there was literally like no gas stations that were in my area. Like, And they were
Yeah.
like, 50% of Virginia, like gas stations are out of gas. And I'm like, what? Like, what is this?
Well, and the thing that was so fascinating to me about that was it was panic buying, that there's a disruption of services. And of course, we're all still waiting to see some of the after action reports and that breakdown. And one of the things that's going to be interesting, if y'all haven't taken a moment to go through and read it, the White House, President Biden issued an executive order about a week ago that deals with cybersecurity. And it starts at the federal level, but if you understanding how funding and everything works, it has that ripple down effect. So it really will impact smaller um, companies and city, state, local, tribal governments. But one of the things it does is it puts in there that there would be kind of that after action committee that would look at some of these and say, all right, what are some lessons learned? But one of the things that I've heard, haven't seen confirmed, was that it really wasn't the OT, so it wasn't the ICS that was impacted by this. It was more the financial, like the accounting system, so the business side of the house. But as a preemptive, they went ahead and shut it, which is absolutely what you do. It's when you don't know where it is, you've got to just turn it, pull the plug, turn it off, cut the power, and then build out from there. Like, okay, this one's good. Now let's go. This one's good. Okay. Which got to be fun with Atlanta. We preemptively shut down the Wi-Fi at the airport, mainly because we didn't know who was connecting. And if you've ever seen when some system in a lot of the aviation systems are, you have one vendor providing services for all the airlines or stuff. So one of those vendors goes down and suddenly you've got delays everywhere. Well, think about how that would be if it's, and I talk about the world's busiest airport where it's Delta's hub, Southwest, various airlines all go through there. So if Atlanta's airport is crippled and can't take in, we would have a takeoff and landing every minute. And so if suddenly that volume is shut down, all those people are stranded, it was worth it to say, okay, let's shut this now. Let's see what's going on. It didn't disrupt air services, but the Wi-Fi, it was like, all right, let's just make sure, because we don't think the network's impacted, but we can't take that risk. So I get why Colonial would say, hey, we can't take that risk that they've gotten into our critical infrastructure, our system, our SCADA systems. Let's turn it off, and then we'll turn it back on when we know that it's just the business. And business email compromise is continues to be one of the biggest pathways for a lot of this coming in. So it is, yes, I do implore, make sure that you are teaching your legal department, your finance department. HR is actually one of the bigger attack vectors, is between HR and accounting. The phishing emails where it's like, hey, I have an invoice that needs to be paid. Educate them. Don't. There was that op-ed or opinion piece in the Hill online here that was just bad on so many levels.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I kind of a reminder. Yes, as y'all build your career, people build careers in information security, you will be blamed for everything. You'll be asked to fix printers at every family gathering, or, hey, my iPhone is doing a weird thing. Can you just be prepared for it? But yeah, be prepared for a lot of bad op-ed hot takes.
So I know that you, like we discussed earlier, you work on drones and smart cities and autonomous vehicles. So we were talking on the Haunted Hacker podcast yesterday. I think you visited them recently also, about things like the Amazon sidewalk, and setting up pretty much smart homes, smart cities, just having everything interconnected. from a privacy perspective, how do you feel about that? Do you have, one of the devices in your house, or are you like
No.
nothing electronic?
No, and I'm just laughing because I have thoughts. So I did a series of research and presentations, and I'm going to absolutely blank on their names, but there's several researchers who were with Google up until recently and who were doing amazing work in this area on both facial recognition as well as the IoT data, both the privacy and also getting clean data, making sure the algorithms in kind of every step of the way. But I really watch things like Clearview AI and Ring, where they're forming these partnerships with local law enforcement that in some cases arguably are being used to circumvent the Fourth Amendment, because they're going to the private, you've given the right to your data to these companies. So the companies have a legal right to have the data. And so when law enforcement comes and says, hey, we might want some of this data, I do have issues with some of that, and making sure that we've got those protections built in. And this is where, if anyone is considering pursuing or studying law, uh, there really are opportunities that need to be paid attention to and built out to say, okay, we're building these systems, but are we looking at all the legal and policy ramifications? And is our code, is everything doing what we think it does? And if not, knowing how to raise the alarm and knowing how to build better. Uh, One of the things that I thought was funny, not in the haha sense, but looking at, for example, smart cities and these meters and going, okay, if the goal is we're addressing a parking problem, but okay, that's great. That is, if I need to know where I can park my car and get that information, fantastic. But what else is the meter capturing? I mean, we find this with drones as well, that you forget that the way the quad, the aircraft is communicating back to its ground station is it's, basically knocking on every connected device, every other cell phone signal saying, hey, are you my controller? Are you, like, hey, is this where, like, are you supposed to be telling me what I'm doing? So you have these IoT devices, not only in the air, but in smart meters, in be it smart meters for parking, smart meters for homes. And they're all kind of knocking on all the doors saying, hi, are you something I should be connecting to? Are you something I should be connecting to? Hi. And it's capturing all this data. Does it need to be? And how is it being stored? How is it being protected? So it's kind of a design. I'd love to see and encourage people as you look at and start working on these projects, keep that in the back of your mind, like be aware. And to the extent you bring your chair to that table and insert your voice into the conversation, that's fantastic. But it raises a concern of how is this, and if these companies even know the data that they have. I mean, that's the kind of first like inventory of what are we collecting? Do we want the responsibility for it?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that's a very, somebody in the comment, said it was a very interesting topic. And I definitely agree. I always think about these things just from, the perspective of, being an ethical hacker and,
Mhm.
just, because we have connected devices, I see,
Yeah.
the point in the future where we're going to have, all of the IoT devices that are not necessarily regulated. They're not, there's no, clear standards for, how they're
Mhm.
supposed to collect data, what information is okay, who they can share that information with. So I definitely think that it's an interesting topic. So I mean, and kind of on that
Mhm.
subject, you mentioned earlier about bug bounty. So I
Mhm.
was reading this article. I was talking about coders' right projects, and that there's a lot of like kind of legal issues that reverse engineers and hackers and security researchers come across when you're doing like some of these, bug bounty type programs, or when
Mhm.
you're, just doing your ethical hacking. What would be your advice for people who are, trying to do ethical hacking and, just as far as staying out of trouble?
Well, and part of it is, good for you for questioning. And by that, having that curiosity and realizing it's kind of a back and forth between getting the companies to understand that, hey, we're users of your product. We want better, safer, but there aren't standards across that, which then leads to, or there aren't incentives. So it's great to see some of these companies offering up bug bounty programs. But as a researcher, one, know if there is a program in place, look at what's within scope and what's outside of scope before you start doing work. Have a plan and say, okay, if I find something, who am I going to how am I going to reach out to them? Eh, Knowing that, yes, there are frustrating moments where you're like, y'all didn't even care. Like, you built this, or you made a business decision to not make but sometimes they just didn't know, or um, the technology hadn't caught up. I mean, worked with some researchers who did, I think they ended up calling it mouse jack, where in some of the wireless mice, Logitech through had made basically a business decision way back, and they went and found where in their manuals they discussed it, because in their mind nobody was ever going to be able to, the computer, like the skills and the processors weren't going to be able to work fast enough to, basically you could take over a mouse, which you don't think about, but then you start thinking like, if I could take over your mouse, what all could I do from an unmanned or unmonitored workstation? I mean, I've got the credentials and we're showing this, but they had made the decision where they're like, oh, so understanding all of that, kind of the giving grace. And so that when you present the problem to them of, hey, I've done this, having that documentation, but also be wary, and don't necessarily put all your cards on the table. I saw even in companies that did have a vulnerability disclosure program already in place. The researcher had documented everything, stayed within scope, did everything. And then they sent them an NDA that said, hey, if you want to accept this large amount of cash, here's what we need you to sign. And they sent it to me and said, hey, can you take a look? I was like, oh, yeah, you can't sign this. Like, not even a little bit. Like, not even, is this a joke? Because buried in that document were basically, they could not continue research in that topic area. They couldn't, they would have to agree to never disclose their issues stuff. So the company was basically using it to bury the research, and buy them off. So be wary of that. Disclose.io is a nonprofit group started by Casey Ellis and several others in the area. Disclose's main kind of thrust goal is to help companies and researchers kind of come together. So helping companies establish best practices, doing that, but also helping the researchers understand. So pay attention and follow groups, organizations like that, that do have kind of everyone's best interest in mind of, hey, we want your research to get out there. We want you to do it safely. We want you to do it, in a way that's going to get these problems fixed, but also to the companies like, hey, here's how not to muck it up. Here's how to do it and do it effectively. So yeah, and
Yeah,
happy hunting.
yeah, I definitely see the problem because, like if you're finding bugs that are out there, it's nice, of course, to get paid, but right, like the natural follow-up to that is that, one, you want to talk about the work that you've done. You want to talk about, the bounties that you've collected. You want to talk about that information and talk about, how you went about that, right? But if you sign away, your rights and privileges to do research in that area, that not only affects your work with just that company, but it affects your work with other companies as well, which is something that
Yeah.
people need to be, cognizant of, especially if they're, doing security research in a specific area, so
Yeah,
that's
no,
very
and
interesting to me.
the researcher that I was helping later publicly disclosed kind of his trials and tribulations. But the joke at the time was as he walked away from this large bounty, he's like, wow, that was my down payment on my Tesla. My wife is going to kill me. And spoiler alert, he was good enough at what he does to where through his regular job, he now, I think, is his wife even has a Tesla. So while it seems daunting at the time, know that, what seems big, because that was one of the other things for me as I was like, I felt like I was like spending all this time writing articles, going to like really like shoring up my knowledge base and building these connections. But at the time I thought, gosh, I'm not seeing the results. Like I'm not, so don't get discouraged and like know that that perspective sometimes comes even a couple years later, or that if you see someone doing something awesome, I always try to drop people notes to be like, hey, really love your work on this, or periodic reminder, you're a rock star, like, or you're awesome, or keep it up. Because a lot of times, again, you don't see it and it's easy to get lost. And so trying to lift others up sometimes helps. I had to put together a friend said, hey, I'd love for you to come talk to my group. Do you have some videos, prior talks? I was like, oh yeah, sure. It's when I started having to catalog some of them, I'm like, huh, look at me. I've gotten to talk, like, I have done a lot in this. Like, oh, okay, that's really cool. Like, that's awesome. I didn't realize I did as much as I did because I was lost, like bogged down
In the
in
day to
it.
day.
So, and I mean, I'm not saying that this group is an excellent example of that, but the fact that you have put together an opportunity for people to learn and like build each other and, you know, connect, that's pretty awesome. So,
Thank you. All right, so I
mhm.
just got DM'd a question. It says, what are the intersections between cyber law and threat intelligence?
A lot of it comes from, you have this information. It brings in the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. There are different, um, what you can and can't share, of where you've got different authorizations, wiretap prohibitions, you've got Title 10, Title 50, you've got different, even within law enforcement, intelligence, government communities. So there's a lot going on, but there's also a lot that the government is now doing to recognize that one way to strengthen our defense is to know what's going on, to have that context, that intelligence of the threats. So you have everything from like the MITRE ATT&CK framework that's mapping out those TTPs, that is built on people sharing that information and being okay to say, yeah, we got hit with something. Let's let's see how it works. I mean, that's one thing Scythe tries to do, and especially in the healthcare area, is with an adversary emulation, we can emulate those attacks and offering it up to our healthcare community, saying, hey, for free. Hospitals can't go down right now. So why don't y'all can have free access to our platform and test against some of this common ransomware and see where you stand and see, getting that. But watching all kinds of different groups work together, it does. That's kind of, if it's of interest, that is an area that I see continuing to expand from needing lawyers who understand the technology. So that is kind of a call to arms. If you do have that background and you're thinking, hey, maybe I want to, like maybe law school. Yes, please. Law school will be boring. It will be awful. It will be tedious. I went to a state school because I could, through student loans and working side jobs, it helped me afford it. Go to night school. There are a bunch of different ways to do that. But we need you because we need people who can understand how to do that. So.
All right. So we are shortly after 3 o'clock here. So I like to try to get us to end on time, but I just want to thank you so much for coming out and speaking with us. This has been such an amazing discussion. So I thank you for taking your time to spend with us. And do you want to share your, I guess your, not your LinkedIn, what is it called? Your Twitter or?
Well, in both, please do, at Lawyer Liz on Twitter, but also drop me a note in LinkedIn, connect and just say, hey, we chatted on, the coffee chat and, so that I have context. And if there are things, follow-up questions, industries that my say Rolodex, but y'all won't even know what that is. My Rolodex is your Rolodex, but please don't make fun of that. But thank you.
I know what a Rolodex is, and I had a Game Boy, so
Awesome.
I think we might be in the same bracket there. But thank you so much for your time and for coming out.
Thank you.
Lawyer Liz on Twitter. Be sure to follow her, and we appreciate you for being here with us. So thank you.
Thank you. Go forth and conquer. I love it.
We're gonna take over the world.
Right. Bye.
All right.